whoever's listening, wherever you are. I'm in the studio with Lalo and Andy. Hi, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning. We have some fun articles for you today. It's things that we have previously talked to you guys about. I feel like there hasn't been anything dramatic happening. I said that last episode too, but this week, again, nothing really. We are starting with a really hot topic, nothing good for me, Andy and I to talk about as we have different views on this one. But let's go straight into it so we can get you updated and you can stay compliant by knowing everything that's happening in the industry, right? So first one, so European lawmakers adopt a law to set methane emission limits on fossil fuel imports from 2030. So there's still a bit of time, but it also takes a lot of adjustments for companies, I assume. So it says methane is a potent greenhouse gas and the second largest contributor, here we go, to climate change. International gas suppliers like the United States, Bulgaria, and Russia will need to reduce methane emissions to comply with the EU's standards. The European Union's law sets an example for other regions to follow in curbing methane emissions and addressing climate change. I mean, someone has to do it, right? So we can go into the details whether it's right or wrong first, and then we can address, because this is a law that will go into effect, and we obviously have to accept that, right? What steps can people take as a supply chain to support the U.S. efforts to curb methane emissions and to mitigate climate change impacts? So what can we do to comply here? And you can obviously share your opinion on this if you want.
Choice of compliant or not. I mean, you were asking the question
but what can people do? Like, what is the necessary?
Well, I mean, but that's the issue here is not with, in a sense, your supply chain. It's with your carriers. It's what fuels are they using, and those kinds of things. And again, that just comes back to your transportation, whatever you're using. The thought is behind it, it forces people to go with more electric vehicles because they don't put out the methane fumes or whatever, methane gas. However, the power plants that would be used to generate electricity to charge up all the electric vehicles, there you go. You're going to be using fossil fuels to do a lot of that. I mean, this is one of those, it's in the supply chain. This isn't really necessarily an issue that supply chain can say, what can we do to minimize it or not? It's more of a case of, here's just another scenario, in my opinion, that the European countries have got together and they've added another tax on the backs of Europeans that it's going to make fuels more expensive. And what are they going to do with it? So, what to comply? It's whoever's importing the fuels over there. So,
I hate bringing up this topic, but here we go with China. I mean, there's so much going on again. So China imposes sanctions on 2 U.S. defense firms for selling weapons to Taiwan, citing interference in their internal affairs. So senior executives of these companies are banned from entering China. Crazy. And their properties are frozen. So Taiwan considers the arms sales crucial for their defense amid increased Chinese military activities near the island. Well, this is pretty interesting. I don't really know what to think about it. What does that say? I mean, I feel like China is just trying to get, revenge.
Well, they're playing hardball. It's a retaliatorial type of deal where there has been a lot of action that, again, remember, China is claiming that Taiwan is still part of China. And there's this dispute, and they have made the President Xi made the statement that China is looking at taking on Taiwan are taking over Taiwan, I guess, at some point. And, everybody's expecting some kind of action sometime in 2024 here. And the issue here is that there are 2 U.S. companies that have made sales of military goods to Taiwan, and that's what China is sanctioning them. So just like, folks, you hear, all right, the U.S. and the U.K. and Western countries are sanctioning people, let's say, in Russia or Russian oligarchs or companies and stuff like that, and or Chinese companies or whatever. Well, in this case, China is put sanctions against a couple of U.S. Military or defense related industry companies. And they had done it before also with Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin. It had done some things there. This particular article where this took effect this week, General Atomics Aeronautical Systems and General Dynamics Land Systems. And so they're taking action against those to say you cannot do business now in China. And they've frozen their goods and all that kind of stuff. So all this is that China is playing hardball and they're pushing back on some of this. I don't know how much business they transacted in China as far as, their manufacturing or whatever they were doing in China, but any of their assets now are frozen.
What measures do you think do companies have to take? We maybe have talked about this, but like, what measures do you think companies should take for all these changes in like industry changes with China and like the threat, and we don't know what kind of sanctions they will put on us. We don't know what sanctions we will put on them because the United States is pissed too. So like, what can companies do that frequently deal with China? You're kind of on like the edge because you don't know, like anything could erupt at any seconds with China, I feel like.
Lala, it looked like you were going to say something before I comment on that.
No, I was just going to, not about what Anik just asked, but just in general, what China's doing is not wrong. It may not be right in the U.S. eyes or the Western world's eyes. It's just not wrong. They don't recognize Taiwan as an independent state. Much like Israel was not considered an independent state for many years. Well, in fact, it's still not considered an independent state according to some Muslim nations. And so, it's one of those things where I guess you just have to pick your battles or figure out where or when you're going to be dealing with. So here's the deal. You're a with regards to trade and as a business, and again, I'm not going to go into the political aspects of it, but with regards to international trade and with regards to your business, you want to do business with China because you feel that it's a profitable and worthwhile economy for you to be participating in. If part of your business concerns or involves selling weapons, and you happen to provide and selling those weapons to Taiwan, the circumstances behind that because China has already drawn the line. In this case, they've made it very clear what they're going to do. These 2 companies are sanctioned, and so are the executives of those companies. So who knows if they had property in China or not? But it sounds like they might have, and they no longer have access to that. Again, as much as we in the United States have the right or the ability to do sanctions, so does China, and in fact, so does Russia, and so do almost any other country. It's just they're doing what they feel is correct. So, with regards to trade and a company, well, I guess at that point you're going to have to decide what's more important for me to sell weapons to Taiwan and not do business with China, or do I pick my battles again, and not sell my weapons to Taiwan and keep doing business with China? A lot a lot of times that's a moral decision, right? Sometimes that's a ethical decision. Sometimes it's just a business decision. I mean, again, and I'm not here obviously to dictate what you should be doing, but you should make yourself aware, very much like this previous story that we just talked about on climate change and fossil fuels, et cetera, et cetera. You just need to make a decision. Do you think this is, something silly and you're not going to deal with it? Okay, well, then you're not selling into Europe, because if you're not going to comply with it. Do you feel like it makes sense and you want to get on the bandwagon? Well, great. Then go ahead. That's your decision. That's your prerogative, so I don't know. To me, that's just the deal. These things happen and there's nothing illegal in my opinion with what China is doing, because they do have the right to do that for their own country. So that's just my thing.
One of the things that comes up to play here is that, and Lila, you hit it. I mean, you got to decide in doing business, are you going to do business with China and not with Taiwan, or vice versa, and those kinds of things, or some of these companies. One of the key that's going to come into play with a new or updated regulation that we just heard from Lindsay from Michelle Schultz's, the Schultz Trade Law Group, that came out of the BIS conference, and that was regulations associated with anti-boycott regulations, and in particular, if you're doing business with somebody in China, and they say, all right, yeah, we can do this business as long as you don't do business with a particular country or with a particular company that does business in that country, that would fall under the definition as a request to boycott certain companies due to, their geopolitical issues. With that, in the U.S. now, if that happens, you have a responsibility and requirement to report who you're doing business with, what transpired there, and literally the person's name, not as well as the company. And you have to report that back to was it export? I've just gone blank. You have to report to the U.S. government. We'll leave it at that. So this is some of those things that come into play when you're asking, Anik, to your question, what is it we can do or should do? Well, this is just, it's a non-U.S. regulation in China that did the sanctions, but what U.S. regulations come into play, as well as now, Canadian and Mexico have regulations that come into play in this as well. What's that going to do with things? And so that's some of the things you got to look at in doing business, and now ask your customs attorney firms that are involved, along with your own internal legal and purchasing and all that, and evaluate what you're doing in relation to maybe transacting business with these defense companies. And does that affect you or not? And you need to make an assessment on it.
Very interesting. Yeah, I think that was a great standpoint, Lalo, because it is true. While we talk really badly about China at times because, our U.S. and China are just so different, they obviously have rights to do whatever they want. And, obviously you can't be acting like a fool, which they do sometimes, but, these are the rights they have. And if that's the route they're going with, companies, I guess, have to reroute and make their own decisions. Anyways, we are going on to part 3, which kind of involves China, not really. So the U.S. and Japan vowed to enhance their security collaboration to address China's growing influence, which I think this one, if I can give my opinion, again, the U.S. has to kind of create new collaborations or enhance their collaborations that they already have to strengthen just other relationships. So to me, that sounds pretty good. It says that joint military exercises, intelligence sharing, and technology cooperations are key components of the security partnership. The collaboration also seeks to deter and counterbalance China's assertiveness in the region. So yeah, this is with a motive of going against China, or I guess being secure in other corporations. What are your first thoughts on this one?
Keeping it to just the trade and, business stuff that we need to be aware of. What does this mean? I guess, you just need to, I guess I kind of just wrote down a list of things, like carry out like more risk assessments for your company, just to make sure that your supply chain is secure or safe, et cetera, and identifying any suppliers or items in that supply chain that are going to, I guess, hinder your trade, and the good thing is that this collaboration is going to help with more information, I guess, and more and to help you secure your supply chain, because it'll be more there's more help from outside parties outside of the U.S. to help you or to aid in securing that. I don't know. Just make sure that you are always like keeping up with all the updates. I don't know how this is going to evolve. So with regards to any rules or regulations or agreements that we may come up with Japan, we definitely need to make sure that we stay up to date to make sure that you're still complying, and making sure that you're staying up with any new requirements, any new documentation, maybe any new reporting, because that's probably going to be a biggest part of this is just the data reporting. So pretty much just it. I mean, yeah.
Well, as far as what I'm seeing here is you see that the U.S. and Japan, obviously Japan is worried about China as well. I mean, this is the focus on this particular article is such that, Japan is trying to strengthen. Now, this is the articles in the U.S. News and World Report. Is China or Japan is worried about the activities of China. China's growing in the industry or in the region as far as militarily action and whatnot. You have North Korea that also is taking some actions and emboldened because of, North Korea's economy predominantly is bolstered by China. And so with that going on, you have two countries right there close to Japan. And with that, they're trying to secure up the relationship with the U.S. and more defense activities. You also have an active collaboration between South Korea, Australia, and the U.S. regarding, again, defense movements in there. Japan now is becoming much more active in that, actually to the point where Japan now has launched, has built and launched 4 submarines that are now in the region. Although they use, instead of nuclear power like the U.S. and other countries use, Japan's are diesel electric engines. But the point being is that they're, bolstering their own Navy and whatnot in a proactive measure to defend themselves against China's activities. And obviously here too, China has been, they're not happy about it, and they're making negative comments because it gets in the way of what they're trying to do. So the collaboration here geographically of Japan, Korea, Australia, and the U.S., I'm sure other countries may get involved as well, is an effort to try and counter some of the things on China. Now, that said, what people what's your takeaway in this? You see all these activities going on from a country level and the leadership of all these countries involved and then their militaries. You need to look at your own company and simulate exercises within your own company. What if China did and took military action against Taiwan? Or what if North Korea did something and launched missiles and they actually hit Japan or something, and now it's disrupted that whole region? What would you be able to do? Do you have enough diversity in your supply chain? And I say diversity, I'm talking multiple sources. Do you have enough diversity in your supply chain to recover from that and still meet your own customer deadlines that you have? What happens if you lost the supply chain sources out of Taiwan and China, or from the U.S. to those countries, and you lost the sales off of that? Would you be able to recover and all that? So when you're looking at what do you do in this situation, when you hear stories about this, look beyond it and say, what if they actually had to take action? What if the U.S. and Japan actually had to work collaboratively in defending taking action to defend that country against, let's say, China or some other entity? What's the impact on you? You've got to simulate some of that. And the only way to do that is get multiple representatives of different departments and walk through that and see what you can come up with. You just need to know what the impact would be on your own company.
Okay. Very interesting. So, these were our 3 articles. I think they were good, but nothing crazy was happening, obviously. For our fun fact, I want to remind you guys that we have started Simply Trade Podcast Canada version. I call it Canada's version because, the whole Taylor Swift's version. So we have versions too, and this one is the Canada one, and we launched it just yesterday. Our first one, it talks about, I don't know if it's CARM. Do you say CARM or do you say CARM?
Yeah.
CARM?
No, it's CARM.
CARM, okay.
Yeah. No, CARM, yeah.
CARM, yeah. And it talks on that. And so go listen to that one. Very interesting. And if you are doing business with Canada, I think it's even better for you. Or if you're looking into it. So maybe do a little research with that episodes, because, you can't get that stuff anywhere. You'll have to pay for a workshop, and we're giving it to you for free with Kim Campbell. That's who was on the podcast. Anyways, now for my fun fact. Not really a fun fact, but it is a fact. So do you know what the most, the country with the most resilient supply chain is? So
Switzerland.
Resilient in what kind of connotation?
Well,
resilient to what?
I don't know. I mean, resilient is the word. You can look it up, like country with the most resilient supply chain. You were right, Lalo, by the way.
I don't know.
You got me. Mexico.
No, it's Switzerland.
Oh, I said that.
Yeah, you were right. I said you were right. My internet went out, I think. Yeah, it's Switzerland. Oh. But do you know which one is the least? Venezuela.
Well, a third world country like Ethiopia Venezuela. Or something. Yeah, okay.
All
right. Well, that was my fun fact.
I have a fun fact. What does today have to do? Today's April 15 when we publish this. What does today have to do with any of the stories that we had? With our first story today that we had today? You don't know. Today is, whether you like it or not, you got to pay your taxes. So
yeah, tax day.
Is it
in the U.S.
tax day?
Today's tax day in the U.S.
Tax filing day. Yeah.
Oh, because it's the 15th. I was thinking of today. Oh my God! You know what, Lalo? I have to say, my mom does listen to the podcast sometimes, and she listened to the last one with the bunny, and she was in the gym while she was. I don't know how she does it, but she listens to it in the gym. And she was listening to the joke you made with the bunny that, I don't know. I don't remember how it went, but she was like, she told me, she's like, Anik, I was in the gym and I was listening and I went, what? Like out loud. And then people were looking at me. She's like, people were just looking at me because I said it out loud and I didn't realize, but I was so shocked and I believed it. And then I heard that it was a joke. And I thought that was so funny. So if we got you there, Lalo got you there, then you're one of those people too, which he got all of us. But yeah, anyways, just wanted to share that. And yeah, so that will be the end of our episode. We hope to see you next week again, whether it's in your car, whether it's at your work, wherever you're listening. We will see you there. Bye.
Thank you very much for joining us. Simply Trade is brought to you by the generous contributions of Global Training Center. You can follow the show and GTC on LinkedIn or Twitter and other social networks. Make sure you check out the show notes in the description for a full rundown of today's show with all the important links. Also, make sure that you share this with a friend and subscribe on your favorite streaming platform. We really like hearing from you. If you enjoyed the show, make sure to rate and review wherever you listen to this podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a guest in the show or would like to sponsor Simply Trade or suggest any topic you would like for us to discuss, please contact us via email at simplytrade@globaltrainingcenter.com, or you can DM us on Twitter at simplytradepod. Thank you again for the privilege of your time. Happy trading. Simply Trade is not a law firm or an advisor. The topics and discussions conducted by Simply Trade hosts and guests should not be considered and is not intended to substitute legal advice. You should seek appropriate counsel for your own situations. These conversations and information are directed towards listeners in the United States for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only and should not be substituted for legal advice. No listener or viewer of this podcast should act or refrain from acting on the basis of information on this podcast without first seeking legal advice from counsel. Information on this podcast may not be up to date depending on the time of publishing and the time of viewership. The content of this posting is provided as is. No representations are made that the content is error-free. The views expressed in or through this podcast are those of the individual speakers, not those of their respective employers or Global Training Center as a whole. All liability with respect to actions taken or not taken based on the contents of this podcast are hereby expressly disclaimed.